Welcome into a special All Things Analytics edition of Capturing the Intangibles. We bring in two of our experts to debunk the BI is dead movement and provide insights behind successful implementations and where the industry is headed. Let's dive in. Hey everyone, welcome into another episode of Capturing the Intangibles podcast. And we've got a special one today. Today we've brought our good friends, Brad Stillwell and Rob Kraus, into the house today to talk a little bit about BI and analytics. So why don't we start off with some brief introductions? You guys know Mike. We can ignore him right now. But Brad, why don't we get a quick introduction from you?
Yeah, thanks for allowing me to ignore Mike with you. Brad Stillwell. I run analytics strategy at Infor. Been in the BI and analytics space for more years than I care to make public.
Well, now you're going to leave people guessing? Okay.
I mean, I'm all about BI and analytics. I don't want to give you hard facts, but the hard facts are 20 years.
Got it. Rob, how about you?
Hey guys, so I lead solution consulting here, focused on analytics, and background is also in all things analytics. Not quite 20 years, but spent a lot of time as an implementation consultant before moving into pre-sales role. So happy to be here and join you guys virtually today. Thanks.
You're only 20 years old, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thanks again, guys, for joining us. You know, Mike Mossmo and I have been talking a lot, probably too many sessions on overall big data and data management strategy and all things data lake, or whatever Mike's calling it, lake houses now, and his passion in that area. But we wanted to transition into the more visualization. What can you do with it? What's the output? And we were waiting to secure this time on your calendars to get it right from the experts who have been handling this for Brad. I think he said 30 years now. So let's start off with that. So Brad, let's start with you. What do you think the current state of BI and analytics is today? And I guess the bigger question is it dead?
Yeah, I love when every couple of months some analyst report comes out that talks about, how this thing is dead, dashboards are dead, BI is dead, right? Data warehouse is dead, right? Everything that we've been doing for the last, 30 plus years is all dead. Because that's when I know that something else is now entering the analytics hype cycle that is just going to be a part of the standard platform with all of these other technologies in the next 5 or 10 years, right? So where I see kind of BI going is where it's pretty much been, in the sense that we've got all these new things coming out, but they're not really replacing what we had before. What we're really seeing is more of an additive effect, right? When data discovery was like the hot ticket 10 years ago, it was like, okay, reporting is going to be dead. No one's going to be doing reporting anymore. Well, guess what? Everybody's still doing reporting, but now they're also doing data discovery and visualization, and they're finding ways to fill different gaps with different capabilities. Mike, you'll appreciate this one, when the data lake came out, right? It's like, oh, big data, data warehouse is dead. Nobody's going to need it anymore. But now you've got companies like Snowflake that have taken the data warehouse to the cloud at massive valuations, just again showing the need that it filled a gap. It brought in a new type of data that we weren't accessing before, but it really just augmented and added to, the existing platforms and stack, and kind of extended the reach. And now, the next one was, okay, AI is now going to kill BI, right? Well, I think what we've seen, with customers that we work with is that, again, they're complementary, that a great AI strategy is built off of a solid foundation of BI and data warehousing, because you don't just want to do AI on your unstructured big data. You can get a lot of value from doing AI on small data or medium-sized data or transactional data that's already locked up in your, enterprise data warehouse. And then the most recent report I saw was the dashboard's now dead, right? We're moving past the dashboard. Natural language query and natural language generation are really kind of bringing about the death of the dashboard. But for me, again, I still see a lot of users utilizing the dashboard we're just now saying that maybe the dashboard isn't the starting place for analytics anymore. We're kind of opening up the starting place to be other areas, right? Visualizations aren't the only way to consume information. Humans can consume informations in different ways and in different places. And so for me, I think the current state of BI is we're just seeing gaps that have existed over the last 10, 20 years getting filled in with new technologies, but not necessarily replacing anything, just making it a much more robust ecosystem where having kind of an open architecture really becomes the name of the game, because it's not going to be a silver bullet. It's got to be a lot of different components working together to solve a much bigger problem than maybe we were solving before.
So, Brad, I'm a little curious to dig into that, though, because you make a lot of good points. But is there an underlying friction that there's a certain enthusiasm by the analyst communities and customers out there where there's a sort of looking forward to BI kind of being dead or being tossed aside? Or what is propelling that type of marquee headlines every year when analysts come out with a new report saying this is going to all but disappear from your product stack, and you're going to replace it with this new technology? Or what's really driving that friction, or why does this keep cycling around every single year? And what is the actual underlying kernel of the issue of why this keeps getting dredged up here? Any thoughts around that?
Yeah, I think it goes back to, anybody who's been in a company long enough knows when things are going bad, just rebrand, right? Don't actually change the product. Don't actually change the solution. Let's just rebrand it, right? And I really feel that's what's been going on in the BI space or the analytics space or the augmented analytics space, right? We just keep changing the name when we come out with these new technologies to try and compensate. Well, you know what? This isn't a part of maybe the shortcomings that we had in the past or with the past approach. So now we're going to call it something different to maybe move away from some of the stigma that has been around or some of the missteps that have been around. I think one of the things I shared with you earlier, Mike, was, the current analytics adoption rate, right? We've been doing this for decades now. It's still hovering around about 35%. And we go, but wait, we've got all these new technologies now. We've got all these new, self-service ways of doing things and all these new capabilities that we didn't have before. Surely the number's higher. Well, I think that is the stigma that maybe the analysts are trying to overcome when they talk about, this next thing is going to get us out of this current level of adoption to that next level of adoption. So let's give it a new name so that it doesn't carry some of the legacy baggage of what we used to call decision support, which became business intelligence, which became analytics, which now, is advanced, AI or machine learning.
So when you say that, though, Brad, Rob, maybe I'll position this to you because you see it often in the field, I think, right? Is the adoption low on a lot of the newer technologies? So is it more we're just trying to push customers that direction, or maybe it's more of an RFP question? Do the requirements from customers change, or do we still struggle to even get customers adopting even what was the sales pitch of BI from 5+ years ago?
I think it depends on industry and customer. There's varying levels, but it brings up a great point that user adoption and change management are key to all of this. So you can have the best capabilities, the most awesome, new thing to put in front of somebody, but if it's not simple and easy to use, and if it's not intuitive, it's going to fall flat on its face. And so, from my experience in an implementation, change management and user adoption, and really focusing on that, not only, after go live when people wanted their reports, because oftentimes, you're going to be looking at delivering this innovation with broader initiatives within an organization. So if you want to help that company become more data driven in how they think about their day-to-day operations, that change management needs to be a grassroots level with the different teams on the ground. And so where we see, I think in our customer base and in our day-to-day engagements, RFPs have been changing to include basically every single new buzzword that Gartner or someone else comes out with. But in practice, most of them are still moving into how do we just automate some of the day-to-day tasks so we're not living in spreadsheet hell and redoing a lot of this work manually. So as much as, everyone likes to talk a big game and say, hey, we're doing new and innovative things, I don't see that as pervasive across all customers in all industries. I think there's a few early adopters and market leaders in each, but a lion's share of those companies out there are still battling data silos. They're still trying to, get a single source of truth set up, and throwing a bunch of bodies and visualization tools at it didn't necessarily solve the problem. In some cases, it actually just created more data chaos for them. So, to Brad's point on where the BI market's going and how that user adoption is still so low, I think it's companies that maybe have historically done things a certain way who didn't make change management or user adoption important about when they went out and made their investment and their implementation. They just keep spinning that cycle, and they're back in that low user adoption range. So, a big part of what we do is really trying to help customers understand how they can be more data driven and use the capabilities day to day and put that in a day in the life scenario. So it's something that it's not just something cool that you see in a demo, but it's something that, hey, you know what? I can use this. I can use the chatbot. I can ask questions of my data. I can get to insights much faster. And so, I think that it's really, I know it doesn't really directly answer your question because it's kind of like, it depends, but I would say that wherever the market's going right now, taking a step back and putting that focus on change management and user adoption can't be overstated. And as a technology, partner in the marketplace, I think it's important for us to continue to be that trusted voice with our customers to really help guide them and coach them on where we've seen success or what pitfalls to avoid in adopting new technologies. And so, that's kind of where we see it in the market today. A lot of our time is educating and telling customers and prospects, have you thought about these steps? And okay, you're interested in AI or ML or natural language processing and generation, but how are you going to use it? Where is that going to become tangible in your day-to-day activity? And so, there's a lot of opportunity for transformation right now, but what I see is still a lot of people trying to get out of that spreadsheet hell.
So guys, you guys must see like dozens of RFPs every single week, day in and day out. Is it a function of misaligned outcomes and what customers need versus what they actually want? So when you're actually looking at their RFP, the questionnaire, and what they're actually driving towards, are they emphasizing too much on the visualization, on the self-service components of it, the buzzwords, because they keep chalking in more and more buzzwords, and less so about the outcomes of what those enablement technologies and new things are actually focusing on? Or are you guys seeing sort of a mix? Or are you seeing that it's actually really closely tethered together? Where are you seeing people kind of misalign the incentives and the questions in actually making a wise decision in the market here? Any sort of feedback?
Yeah, I would say that there's a pretty big misalignment in a lot of the RFPs that we've seen. In some cases, it's literally we've seen people put in RFPs like copy and pasted statements from Gartner or other analysts into their RFP. So what would be encouraging is to actually see more questions based on an outcome that they're trying to drive towards versus just some feature function checklist, or does it meet all the new industry or analyst terms that are out there on what we need around AI or innovation. And so oftentimes the RFP is really not accurate on what the customer is trying to do. In some cases, they've outsourced that to go through someone else to handle that RFP process for them. So it's fairly cookie cutter and fill in the blank on this feature. So I would say it's pretty misaligned. And then the customers who really understand what they're looking for, they will have great and pointed questions, and we'll have a much more productive and conversation around that RFP.
Yeah, I was going to say a lot of times it depends on who's generating the RFP, right? Yeah. If the RFP is being generated by IT, that maybe has a historic background in a certain technology set, then tends to be a bias towards those types of questions, right? Or if it's being maybe generated or suggested by a systems integrator that has skill sets in certain areas, then, they kind of tend to bias the RFP a certain direction. What we don't see enough of, to Rob's point, is RFPs that are from the business's perspective. Like, what are they actually trying to accomplish? Because if we had more of those RFPs, we would have less feature and functionality discussions, and we'd have more business enablement discussions, which I think we all got into technology in the first place is because we saw the power of technology to actually change the result in a significant way. So I would love to see more RFPs kind of coming from the business side of the house.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. It's like more focus on what we talk about all the time, more focus on the solution and outcome, as opposed to, which data warehouse or what sort of ETL process do we have versus whatever Snowflake's offer, we get into these tactical, and then you bring sales into that discussion and it goes nuts, right?
Well, and the problem with that process is, man, you get one 3-letter acronym in a RFP that can create a holy war within an organization because they're really passionate maybe about this one little thing, and you miss the forest for the trees, right? It's like throw out what we're trying to accomplish, throw out innovation, throw out transformation. You don't do this, so we're done.
And please don't say RPA, because that sparked a lot of debates on this podcast in the past. But one thing that you guys are talking about is, we talk about this all the time, and now I'm just really curious from what you're seeing our customers and just in the field in general, is the consumption more of what we would call maybe some included analytics in an offering, or is it more custom? Or does that make sense? Is it more what's used more readily? Is it the embedded, or is it always are customers constantly looking at what can I do custom as far as the types of reports or visualizations or dashboards am I trying to get?
Yeah, so here's the way I see the market, because we've really started to see a true bifurcation in the market, where you are either going down the path of included or embedded analytics that are a part of some type of enterprise application or cloud solution, where you kind of expect soup to nuts that it is a solution. Or you have the path of best of breed, where it's, hey, we've already gone down maybe a data warehouse strategy or a data lake strategy or an analytics or BI strategy, and now we're just taking every other system that comes online and trying to fit it into this kind of best of breed approach that we have. So from my perspective, where we've been seeing more success tends to be more in kind of the embedded end-to-end way of doing things. And even the numbers that we see from analysts show that you actually have higher adoption because people actually use the analytics when it's embedded right where they're working, versus it always being this separate thing that I go do, right? It's when analytics becomes a separate process that you do versus being embedded in the process and the way that you interact with information, then adoption goes down, right? So when you embed it, when it's in context, when it is specific to the user, their role, their function, and the decisions that they make, then adoption goes up, engagement goes up, self-service goes up, irregardless of the tool, right? It didn't matter if it was, 10% easier self-service tool versus something else. You immediately get, better adoption, better engagement, and more self-service. And the number that I kind of mentioned to Mike earlier, the last stat that we saw from Gartner, about 35%, analytics adoption rate right now. Well, they're kind of proposing that by 2023, that rate will go up to 50%. And they believe that primarily will be driven by vertical and domain specific augmented analytics that are embedded in solutions versus being standalone best of breed types of approaches.
There's two things there, right? I mean, one is, are we taking what's off the shelf and using that more out of the box, right? Which I think goes back to a little bit more your question, Rick, on how much of that is either being custom or not. And then Brad's talking about okay, what ownership experience do you want to have? Do you want to send users to an entirely different system that's disconnected, that does not feel like it's part of that everyday user's activity? Or do you want to have them have all the reporting and analytics that they need in the same place that they're doing data entry in their day-to-day activities, right? And so to me, the customers that we work with, we try to leverage as much as we can out of the box, but everyone is going to have a slightly different flavor. So it kind of goes back to our 60-30-10 methodology, which is start with a strong foundation, get to the underlying data that you need out of those core systems. And it's great, if they have multiple Infor systems, we make that process much faster to get to that data. But regardless of where customers' data lives, oftentimes they're not running all Infor, they're going to have other systems. We then extend that analytic foundation and data fabric to then incorporate data from other systems to help paint that broader 360-degree view for that organization. So are we using what's coming off the shelf? Yes. But in almost all cases, we're then extending, customizing that, blending it with external data, and leveraging, the data lake and our data modeling capabilities and our way to embed that user experience directly within the applications that they're using most commonly. So going back to user adoption and change management, the less clicks for that end user, the less places they have to go, the more it's just right there on the screen with whatever else they're doing with their daily task. The stickier it becomes, the more they're going to use it, and the better user experience overall. So, it's really a combination of both. But I think that's one of the benefits of having everything all in one place versus having to take on a separate reporting and analytics solution that's going to live outside of the main system of record. You end up, creating that bifurcation. And so to Brad's point on that user experience and embedded analytics, the one thing that I think is also equally important in driving that user adoption and getting folks using it is not only the ability to have a report or dashboard in context, but the ability to look at something from a decision perspective, like on a dashboard, a conditional based alert, and have that take that user to that next best action. So they're blurring the lines between, am I in an analytics tool? Am I in my core system? And, I see, the stoplight indicator here, red light, green, red, yellow, green, I need to take action, clicking on that, and then actually taking that user to a data entry screen. Or, I have an asset that's underperforming. Let me go kick off a work order to do some preventative or corrective maintenance on that asset. And that's where we see, our customers have higher success rates and user adoption, is the more of those day in the life workflows that we bake in to that user experience. We really start seeing that them as an organization become more data driven now, because we've simplified and we've lowered those barriers of entry to get to the information that everyday users need to get to. So it's a really great point, Brad.
Yeah, I want to walk back to that 35% and 50% that you're talking about earlier, Brad, because I just completely I had a whirlwind of emotions and thoughts about it. Because number one, it was staggering to me that 35%, for as long as people have been talking about BI, that seems like such a staggeringly low number, and I couldn't wrap my head around it. It actually really super challenging. Number two, the fact that I think you quoted that by 2 years from now, in less than 2 years, we expect that number is going to jump up 15 points to 50%. Relatively speaking, that's an enormous, enormous jump. But I think when you guys start to talk about the fact that it's no longer just driving usage into domain-specific analytics or driving into a separate application experience, but it's actually about seamlessly blending that experience into your application workflows that you're actually doing work in, that kind of makes a lot of sense. And it's not that you're convincing customers to jump into a different application more frequently than they currently do. It's about bringing that analytics experience to where they're actually doing that work, which makes a lot of sense, right? And in some ways that starts to get me thinking about whether it's less about compartmentalizing domains like business intelligence as a competency, and then AI and machine learning as a competency, and performance management as a competency. Is it really actually just, are we kind of converging in a few years towards actually all of these are pillars of an insights platform, predictive, historical, how are things going to be forecast, and so on? And are we actually trying to drive that down into a single experience that we're bringing to users here? So just that I'm just walking you through my thought process as I was kind of mulling over some of the statistics and experiences that you guys are seeing here. But it starts to make a lot of sense how all of this is actually starting to harmonize together. So maybe it's not that BI is actually dying or dead, but the experience is evolving and it's becoming transitive to where people are actually doing that work. Does that drive with you guys?
Absolutely does. And I think you actually encapsulated the idea there perfectly, because BI isn't dying, it's augmenting, right? And it's augmenting with all of these other different approaches to working with data and to generating insights and finding solutions. So I think that's why you're starting to see, the rise of this new thing called a composition platform, or data driven applications, is because the lines really are blurring between all of these different technologies. And the more we blur the lines and the more we bake that into the average user's experience in the context of their day-to-day workflows, the more we're going to see that adoption rate continue to grow. So there's been a lot of times where I've seen analysts like Gartner kind of predict out, like in 2 years, 3 years, this kind of massive increase in something. But this is one of those times where I do feel that we're starting to get that critical mass. And I feel a lot of it had to do with, taking a lot of these core enterprise applications to the cloud. And that allowed us to reimagine the experience that took place into those applications. And we started to blur the lines between what used to be discrete tool sets and discrete processes and knowledge bases, and really bring it into an end-to-end composition platform, where now it's like we're just creating data-driven applications that are getting used by the everyday user, not just the IT department and not just the business analyst.
So data and BI is at the core, and it's kind of what we've been talking about, right, Rob, which is the visualizations, the dashboards. It's just another form of extensibility. It's where you execute work, not necessarily the 10-year ago notion that this is just where I just go look at all my metrics and numbers. It's much more meaningful than that, right? But so let me ask a controversial question then. Everything that you guys are saying, what does that do to the pure play or best of breed market?
I think the pure play market, in a lot of ways, has been at a race to the bottom from a cost perspective, for the last, 5 to 8 years. And it has really pushed some of the pure play vendors into, I think, more alliances, right? I mean, the fact is, MicroStrategy, is arguably a very robust platform, with a very good user experience and a good customer base that, couldn't maybe make that race to the bottom like Power BIs or Tableaus or some of the other kind of lighter weight solutions. So they've now opened their platform up to really be just kind of a semantic layer that other tools can access, right? So they've had to start to form ecosystems. And that's why you see, companies like Google acquiring Looker, and Infor and other solutions out there, because they said it can't be kind of just best of breed anymore at lowest price. It's got to be about the ecosystem. And my ecosystem is going to either be tied to my cloud, it's going to be tied to where my data resides, or it's going to be tied to my enterprise applications. But those are really where the allegiance lines are forming, and best of breed is just becoming the catch-all that is the lowest cost provider.
So isn't that actually strongly tethered to Rob, what you're talking about with 60, 30, 10, right? Because I kind of want to tie these two things together with what you're saying, Brad, which is, yeah, these might be very powerful tools for when you go on like Reddit to data is beautiful, right? And people are able to do self-service and, FIFA World Cup rankings and COVID charts and everything like that, because they've got a single sheet spreadsheet and they've got some unique calculation. They want to present it and it looks beautiful, right? Easily distributable, easy to give away for free, and impress other people with the way that you're able to design analytics. But when you actually try to operationalize that in an enterprise setting, when you've got many moving applications, discrete sources of data, then coming back around to what you're talking about, Rob, I kind of feel like it's actually a bigger deal than we're giving it credit for, that 60-30-10 approach. And it's not a proprietary thing, but it sounds like it's more of a mindset here. So actually, I kind of want to drill into that, which is a lot of time is lost on when you buy best of breed solutions. Yeah, you have an amazing individual component, and now you're spending all your blood, sweat, and tears on data acquisition, data harmonization, data cataloging and cleansing, and so on and so on. So that 60-30-10 that you're talking about, it kind of flips that pyramid on its head, right?
Right. Yeah, no, it absolutely does. I mean, as Brad was saying, kind of the race to the bottom on visualization. I mean, data visualizations right now are a commodity. You look at 4 or 5 of those tools side by side, Tableau, Power BI, they all have very similar. I mean, it's almost identical in what the user's going to be interacting with at that point. And so where does the work come in? Where is the challenge for an organization? And with, the market where we're at right now, coming out of COVID and some of the economic challenges, I mean, people had to make tough decisions and they need to be able to do more with less. And so it's great that you have a best of breed tool, but if you don't have the data solved, if there's no confidence or trust in that data, you're, like you said, Mike, you're going to have to reinvent the wheel every time you want to take on a new data project. And can you afford an 18 month to 2 year, window to iterate and spin your wheels, building out data models and dashboards and reports? Or do you want to take, an industry best practice set of dashboard reports and a data model and then augment that? So it's the whole build versus buy. And so what I think is unique about our approach is, visualization's cool and it's going to help the users make their decision, but ultimately the value is how much of the data challenge can, you get out of the gate, right? How much rework are you going to have to do? Do you have a strong foundation to build off of, or do you want to build everything from scratch? So the questions always needs to be to anyone when they're going to take on a new data project is how do they want to manage that time, and do they have enough, resources, or do they want to leverage automation or pre-built aspects to tackle that? And so, going back to where we see that 60-30-10 be really successful is hitting those go live dates, getting customers up and running quickly, solving the bigger challenge around data and doing that in a single solution, right? Do you want to then, Tableau or Power BI are great, but you still need to have more of a data management strategy for that. You need true enterprise ETL. You need, different database technology or even, data lakes that come into play. So a lot of the conversations we're having with our customers and prospects is, what ownership experience do you want to have? Do you want to have to go to market, buy best of breed, pay a premium, the Lego brick, all these different solutions together? So I'm going to use, Tableau with Alteryx with something else, or a Snowflake database on the back end, managing all those different vendor relationships and bringing all that stuff together? Or do you want to lean on the SaaS vendor to solve as much of the data challenge for you up front? And then for that final, 30 or 10% for the user experience, if they're comfortable using Tableau or Power BI, great, right? The visualization at this point it's I don't want to say it's irrelevant, but it's less important than solving the data challenge. And as long as whatever systems you're working with support third party or are open, and I think it's really important to be open in this time and day, especially as Brad was talking about with how other pure play BI vendors have pivoted to be more open. Every organization is going to have their preference on which visualization tool to use, but you solve that data challenge. Now you're building that trust and confidence in the data. People can plug and play whatever visualization they want on top of it, but you're solving the bigger challenge for that organization overall. And so that's where we really see the market going, is leaning more and more on the SaaS vendor to solve that data challenge. And the expectation from customers is, hey, you guys have been doing this. You have tons of customers. Help me solve my data challenges, and then give me the options to visualize. And the more you can have that experience be baked in, great. And that's some of the strengths of our data architecture is, you can have visualization and all that user experience baked into whatever application, whether it's ERP or HCM, EAM, whatever it is. But I would say that the data is still key, and visualizations, they're great, but as long as someone's making a decision and they trust it and they're happy with it, I guess it really doesn't matter what dashboard or what tool they're looking at it in, as long as the data is helping guide that user to the right decision. So
gets your foot in the door. Visualizations get your foot in the door, but it's not an outcome, right?
Right. Yeah.
So we keep talking a lot about this. I like what you called it earlier, Rob, which was data chaos. But it's the difficulties in data connectivity, harmonization, access. Dare I say, centrally managing that once, right? So, Mike, I'm curious your perspective. What are the things that you're seeing, or what are some of the things that we are doing from the data management perspective that can help in that area when it comes to any sort of chaos? How are we giving the ability to only model something once for multiple downstream benefits? Like what's sort of your strategy there?
Yeah, so I like to break that down into a nice, easy to remember acronym: RPA. No.
Oh God, I'm gone. Bye.
Yeah, challenging question, challenging solution, right? So there is a lot of data chaos, and actually what we're seeing now is there's just more of it, right? So data lakes entered the fray, and you can capture more of it in its raw original format, but it doesn't necessarily speak to its data quality, cleansing, and so on. So in the classical world, sort of BC data modeling, people set up SQL transformation rules to clean and harmonize their data, and that worked. But as more and more data enters these systems and you're acquiring more of it, I'm also increasingly seeing that there's a lot more emphasis on data cataloging, and especially like data profiling and data quality. So experimentation, being able to actually map out what are the outliers in your data sets, how you should handle those, to build out your ETL models, but also how to actually influence the read of what these analytics actually translate to. Being able to determine mean, median, and modes. Those are easy examples, but being able to profile the data at scale and then use that as a way to map an understanding onto the data is really, really super important. But beyond that, now as we see, there's a lot of vendors entering into the SaaS enterprise market, data lakes, classically data warehouses, rapid application development. We talked about insights in general, AI, BI, performance management. What we're now also seeing is that if I have a use case and I build a solution and a tool or an answer in BI, well, I might need that same answer, or at least the data set, to look at how we performed previously, to take a look at how I can influence my forecasting models and performance management. And classically, what we see is that everyone's got their own data warehouse, which means that everyone's got their own secret sauce for how they process and create those data models. So if I've got 3 different tools that all would benefit from the same interpretation and modeling of the data, but I have to recreate that in every single silo, well, number one, it increases the risk for error. Number two, it's a whole hell of a lot of work to keep doing this over and over again. And so naturally you start to think, well, what if I could do this the one time? So a big part of this, and I'm just pointing it out, by the way, Rick, you tell me that I talk too much about me being passionate about data and you bring it back around to me. But I think this long lead up, this long elevator ride here is that ultimately, we're taking a lot of the same technologies that we're familiar with, but we're recombining them in unique ways. So the lakehouse approach that we see from Amazon, from other vendors out there, something that we're building out as well, which is to take a separate data storage platform like a data warehouse and blend that together with a data lake, so you get the benefits of big data, raw processing, analysis, but also data curation and performant data analytics, being able to harmonize the data storage layer, the query language, the platform, the ways of shifting data from slower data lakes to faster performing data warehouses, and making it seem like a single product, single experience, single language helps really commoditize a lot of these insights, because now your entire insights portfolio has the benefit of all this being commoditized, and everyone gets the benefit of the insight generation, the data modeling, the analysis that went into this in the middle rather than at the edge.
Yeah, and as you move that more to the middle, again, I ask the same question: what's the benefit of pure play anymore at that point, right? Which is maybe what we're getting around to. But so what's next? What's the big trend that's going to happen next, Brad? What are we not talking about yet that's going to explode and be the next 15%?
So I think the we talked about it a little bit. This idea of composable, data-driven applications. The fact that we've now blurred the line so much that we're creating this toolkit that really allows us to do everything from AI to BI to performance management, to be embedded, to be standalone, to be extensible. Yet, so the fact that we now are going to have platforms that cover integration, all types of integration, not just traditional ETL. Platforms that are going to cover all types of intelligence, not business intelligence, not just business intelligence. Something that is, applications that allow you to do data creation, not just data management, right? So that's really where I think things are going. And I think it's because of, the move to cloud and the blurring of these lines. And then once we start to bring all those technologies together into that kind of set of services that are a composable suite, then we can take BI to a place where I feel like it's never been, but it always has needed to go, which is really data to action, right? We talk about, data to insight, but insight isn't really what people are trying to get to. People are trying to get to an action. They're trying to get to an outcome. And really closing that loop means now BI is not just a dashboard. It is part of a workflow. It's a part of automation. It's part of things that when I make a decision can become a repeatable, scalable process that the machine does for me behind the scenes. So now you're into a whole new domain beyond just BI, right? You really are in that composable, data-driven application realm. And I see that's really where, all the progressive vendors, that's the direction that they're going. And the fact that, when you're kind of like Infor, I think you have a little bit of an early mover advantage because we already had a lot of these pieces of the puzzle. It was just kind of ultimately bringing all those puzzle pieces together into an integrated suite was really just the last step. And since we had already done all of that in the cloud, now it's just services talking to each other, whether that service is being interacted with a human or a machine or some other process now becomes irrelevant.
Yeah, it's interesting. Massimo likes to talk about what's the next giant leap. But I think what you just described is the infrastructure that allows our customers to make those giant leaps, right? It's not just, well, how do I have a way to look at how my business is performing in this way? No, it's much, much bigger than that. How do I get to the real ROI and dare I say into eventual automation? And how do I also keep the TCO low? It's a much bigger picture that we're trying to solve for. Rob, how about from you? Any interesting technologies emerging that you're hearing wanting to be incorporated more, or something that you would like to be incorporated into our offerings?
Yeah, I think it's two things on that. So one, in order for that innovation to take place and for anything to move in the market, I think customers need to, or companies and organizations out there need to make data a focus as part of their leadership and have a centralized focus on that across the organization. And it's the companies who've created center of excellences or have hired people to lead data strategy, I think have done a really much better job of adopting those new technologies and being more successful around that versus every line of business leader for themselves and this constant internal competition on which tools are we going to use and standards should we have in place for that for the organization. So one, I think to get there needs to be a shift within most of the market to really start hiring and focusing on chief data officers or pivoting what the role of a CIO is to be more how can we monetize data versus just keeping our tech debt low, right? And then in terms of where I see other needs emerging in the market would be around data narratives. So being able to have the system really tell you where the pitfalls or the outliers are in the data, but give you a story around why that's happening in some historical context. So something, along the lines of, you get some nice headline, but then some meat to what's going on within that. And I think oftentimes we see, stoplight or conditional based alerts or exception based reporting, but there's still multiple clicks that have to happen before that user gets to, okay, this is really the full context of what's going wrong and where I need to take action. And so I think the market's demanding analytics and just the tech experience in general to be more prescriptive and more proactive versus reactive. And so any of the enabling technologies around natural language query, natural language generation, having a narrative around your data, I continue to see evolve. And even just people starting to use more of, trust the machines more, leverage more automation where they can, leverage chatbots. I do see as the workforce changes and younger folks are going to be entering the workforce, I think they're more likely to trust or let AI kind of run its course and use that as recommendations. So as we see this large population of baby boomers retire, I think we're going to see a dramatic shift in how organizations become more data driven, leveraging all aspects of AI and automation.
I really love that narrative piece actually, because you got me thinking that, in the trading markets, for example, NASDAQ hedge traders, they have such advanced algorithmic operations going on that, as soon as, something hits the wire about a quarterly earnings report, they churn through that data. They generate an immediate analysis. They generate the charting, but they also generate machine delivered narratives of how that data is interpreted. And they actually publish that on the PR Newswire not a minute after, say, something like Apple or Google publishes their quarterly or annual results. Completely not touched by a human being, editorialized whatsoever. They'll come back and edit it afterwards to add in a little bit more zhuzh, but that is completely automated, and they've built out a crazy set of rules to take raw data, raw information, and turn that into something that they're actually publishing on the Newswire to be first to market about their analysis, their trading patterns that result as a consequence of that. So that sort of story, really, really powerful. I didn't even consider that, but really, really powerful if you can actually make that transition over to the enterprise space too.
It sounds like the definition of real time to me continuously changes and updates. Like that's all I was thinking about the whole time, Rob, you were going through that. We talk a lot about how do we constantly get better at real time, but we're really talking, at least now, about as soon as something happens, how can I then, for lack of a better way to put it, report on it? But that kind of current state changes because now we're getting into something like causation analysis. It's not enough just to be able to report on the data. When I see that data, I also have to see the cause. The next step is, well, hell, are we just going to go to full automation? And I don't even need to know the cause, just fix it, right? So I think that's always going to be a continuously moving target that makes a lot of people uncomfortable, and I can understand that to a certain degree. But it's a train that we're not going to slow down at all. So, guys, I really appreciate it. This has been an awesome podcast today. For our listeners, let us know your feedback. If you have any suggestions on upcoming episodes, please let us know. Make sure you subscribe. And guys, thanks again, and we'll see you next time.
Yep. Thanks so much, guys.
Thanks, everyone.